Hi, and welcome to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is March 11th, and today we have an article about a little tiny country that is an island that you may have never heard of before.
As a matter of fact, as a former social studies teacher, I was really surprised to say, wow, here's a place I've never heard of. As a child, I loved looking at maps.
Me too.
I loved rolling out maps and just drawing lines. And I would make my mom mad because she said, you've ruined your map. And I'm like, no. This is exactly what I want to do with it.
Yeah.
So today, we're going to talk about the tiny island nation of Niue, which is located due south of Hawaii in the United States.
But still a far ways away from Hawaii.
Yeah, it's not a short ride.
Hawaii is in the middle of nowhere. It's just ocean around.
This was the only way I could really get my bearings. I said, okay, so Niue is a tiny island. Most people generally know that Hawaii's in the Pacific Ocean. They can find it somewhat closest to the United States. Just draw a line straight down, and you will see lots of those little Polynesian islands, and that's where Niue is located.
I'm going to make a picky correction. It's close to mainland U.S. because it is a state. And that actually used to drive the Hawaiians nuts when they say, I'm going back to the States. We are a state.
That's right. That is a very fair correction. It's completely accurate.
Yeah, that's right. So I lived in Hawaii for a year, and I heard a lot of that. People treat Hawaii like some foreign country, but it is definitely one of the states, and I think it is the most recently added state, or it's the second most recently. Anyway, Alaska and Hawaii came around 1959.
That's right. Hawaii came second.
Yeah, okay. So there you go. This is a smaller place than Hawaii. Hawaii is already pretty small. It's a bunch of volcanic islands. These came into being by volcanoes erupting over and over again till they became big enough. And then the lava eventually broke down into soil so things could grow and eventually became habitable. So Niue is a long ways away from Hawaii, but it's a small island. I knew about it before. I'm just like Chris. I also used to love to look at globes and maps and learn the capitals of places. There's a game called Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? I don't know if you heard about this game.
Oh, yeah. Classic game.
That's right. And so we were playing it, and I usually got a perfect score because I knew the countries and I knew the capitals. And they said, how did you know these?
There's actually an updated version, too. So if you can't find the old Commodore 64 or 128 versions, you can find a modern one on Google, as a matter of fact. I don't think Niue will find its way into Carmen Sandiego, but it's a fun game, and you should check it out if you're interested in geography.
We played it as a tabletop game with the paper version.
All right.
Yeah. So when you said Commodore, no, you didn't need a computer for that.
How about the TV show? Did you ever hear of the TV show?
I may have heard of it, but never watched it.
Iconic kids show from the 90s. It was iconic. Great show from the 90s.
Okay, so anyway, I can recommend board games because it gives you a chance to get away from the computer. You sit down at a table with family or friends, and you do something together, and you learn something. You know, what's not to love? Okay, our title is Niue's New Policy to Protect the Ocean. Once you know what Niue is, and also I said I knew the name of this country before, but every time I ran into it again, I would have to look up how to pronounce it. We've got 3 vowels, and each one is pronounced separately. So it's Niue. And so when I saw it, I looked up the pronunciation again, and then I go, okay, it's about a Pacific island, and it's also about environmentalism. Okay, so our title again is Niue's New Policy to Protect the Ocean. The Prime Minister of the island nation of Niue recently announced a new plan that the country would raise money to preserve its marine ecosystems. Situated in the South Pacific Ocean, Niue is a coral island whose land area measures about 260 square kilometers and is populated by about 1,700 people. In contrast, the country's ocean territory covers around 321,000 square kilometers. These waters are home to more than 100 species of coral and are important breeding grounds for humpback whales. However, it has been difficult for the tiny nation of Niue to protect this area.
In the plan, sponsors from around the world can pay $148 to protect 1 square kilometer of sea for 20 years. The Niue government hopes to raise more than $18 million by selling 127,000 units or about 40% of its territorial waters. This region would become a no-take protected area where the country will crack down on illegal fishing and serious threats would be reduced. The Prime Minister stated that the funds raised would be used for monitoring and evaluation activities to assess reef health and fish stocks. Funds will also be used to strengthen coastal management plans. All these measures will be taken in hopes of passing down an ocean with a sustainable ecosystem to the next generation.
Niue's novel idea to preserve its ocean territory has earned sponsorships from around the world. This approach highlights the urgent need to address the critical environmental challenges the world's oceans are facing, such as plastic pollution, overfishing, and seawater acidification. Governments and individuals alike need to take immediate action to protect our planet. Now, we're going to have to sort of give you a disclaimer here, or sort of a warning, I would say. This is a very heavy, chunky article, and it's got a lot of interesting information in it. But before you read it, you have to be in the mindset that I'm going to try and learn some new information rather than just looking for a relaxing read. Because if you're looking for a relaxing read, you're going to be surprised in little parts of this article because they have like long chunks with a lot of meaning that you're going to have to use a little brain on to understand completely. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. This is a little bit of a tricky read, especially out loud, little behind the scenes. I've read this wrong about 100 times.
Not 100, but there were a lot of NGs on both sides because of this reason. And I often point out this thing about compound noun stress. So we don't say convenience store, we say convenience store. If you have a noun modifying another noun, don't stress the second noun that is modified. And one of these has come up here. So fish stocks. It's a compound, so we say fish stocks. If you say fish stocks, it sounds like they are buying stocks. The fish, the stocks that belong to the fish. So because of those things, you have to read ahead to make sure you give it the correct stress. And if you haven't read ahead, you often run into these things and you have to go back and redo it. So that is one thing that is pretty much not taught in Taiwan, at least it's taught very, very little, that you need to start watching out for, because if you don't follow these rules, it changes the meaning, confuses the listener. So let's go back and make sure we get all of these right. Starting from the title, Niue's new policy to protect the ocean. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a couple pieces of key information here that we need to pay attention to. First of all, make sure you know what and where Niue is. Second, new policy. Okay, so we're talking about something a government is doing. And then to protect the ocean, we know that the general topic is environmental protection, especially as regards the ocean. So this gives us a little mental preparation. But often if we're reading fast, we go through the title, don't have time to think about it. And then in the article, we get stuck in a lot of places. So if you're mentally ready for it, it'll go a little more easily.
The word policy is a nice Greek word for city. And so if we think about the word police and policy, these are all about things that would happen in a city. Maybe a synonym for policy would be strategy.
All right, our first sentence, the Prime Minister of the island nation of Niue recently announced a new plan that the country would raise money to preserve its marine ecosystems. That is packed full of information. So from the beginning, we're ready now that they're talking about Niue, this place we probably don't know very well, if at all. And now we're talking about who the head of government is, the prime minister of the island nation of Niue. So if you didn't look it up, you have a second chance here to find out what Niue is. It's a very small country that is an island. And then it uses the past tense, announced. Announced places something in the past at a certain period of time or certain point in time. So the prime minister announced a plan. It doesn't really sound right if you have not given background about where and when we're talking about. So the sentence also tells you recently announced. We give it a time, and that way it justifies the use of the simple past announced. So the prime minister recently announced what? A new plan. Now that's easy to process. We're kind of ready for that from the title. That the country, okay, if we hadn't told you it's an island nation, we wouldn't have even known probably, would raise money. Would here means was going to. They have plans to do it. This is what we plan to do. To preserve its marine ecosystems. So we now know it's an island nation, and they have a lot of of ocean assets. So in the ocean around the island, there are going to be many ecosystems of plants and animals that live in the ocean. Let's listen to that whole sentence again because it is just so information dense. The Prime Minister of the island nation of Niue recently announced a new plan that the country would raise money to preserve its marine ecosystems.
So we can talk about various heads of states a number of ways. Niue has a prime minister. You might also have a president, a premier, a chancellor, and my favorite, supreme leader.
Where does that come from?
If you have a supreme leader, you probably live in a
dictatorship.
Yeah, not a great country. But man, doesn't it sound good? Supreme leader. All right, let's look at the word preserve here. So preserve is chopped up into two nice Latin words. Pre, you almost certainly know, which means in advance. And then to serve here is actually the Latin word to save. So when we preserve something, we want to save it in advance so that we can use it for later or just to keep it pristine and untouched.
Marine is an adjective form of basically water and ocean. So marine ecosystems, these are these systems, ecological systems that exist in the water. Situated in the South Pacific Ocean, Niue is a coral island whose land area measures about 260 square kilometers and is populated by around 1,700 people. And that gives you a pretty concrete idea of just how small it is and how small the population is.
So 1,700 is a number that a lot of my students would want to say 1,700. I need to specifically make them practice the number 1,700. I think that most native speakers would say 1,700 here.
It reads more smoothly. 1,700 sounds kind of like a child reading it.
It's really wordy. And to be fair, I teach mostly children.
There you go.
And so this is something that you just need to say, yeah, I know you could say 1,700, but it's not really the way most people say this.
All right. One other thing to mention is they say that Niue is a coral island, but there is also a specialized word in English spelled A-T-O-L-L. That's atoll, and that is an island that has formed from coral growing. Okay, our next sentence. In contrast, the country's ocean territory covers around 321,000 square kilometers. What a contrast.
I should have done the math. Like, what percentage is actually land?
That is a huge, huge area. This coral atoll is so small, but this ocean area of ocean around it is so huge. These waters are home to more than 100 species of coral and are important breeding grounds for humpback whales.
So a breeding ground is just your baby-making area, and the hump.
That's so cute.
Yeah, the hump is the thing on the back of a camel. So humpback whales are these kind of large, they're kind of honestly one of the uglier looking whales, but they're still worthwhile. Don't judge them for being ugly. And because we have 100 species of coral, what we know is a lot of this water is rather shallow. If we have humpback whales, there are parts that are extremely deep. This is the Pacific Ocean. However, the coral's giving you a hint that a lot of this is honestly maybe just about 3, maybe 4 meters deep only.
So there must be a huge amount of diversity with these different depths of water there. However, it has been difficult for the tiny nation of Niue to protect this area. Just about anything is difficult when you're a small country. You have limited people, limited resources. They probably are not very wealthy. I'm pretty sure they are not.
The economy of Niue relies on agriculture, fishing, and remittances.
Right, and that we're familiar with that in Taiwan because we have a lot of workers from Southeast Asia, like the Philippines and Thailand and Indonesia. They send remittances back to their families at home.
A remittance is when you send money back home to help support family in another country.
And these are extremely important all over the world. Anybody who has immigrated to another country for work, they will be in that situation. In the U.S., it's people sending back money, for example, to Central and South America.
Okay, let's get ready for paragraph 2, but I was curious, what does Niue actually mean in the local language? And apparently it's unclear. If you directly translate it, Niue means behold the coconut tree, which is an awesome name.
It is.
All right, let's start paragraph 2. In the plan, sponsors from around the world can pay $148 to protect 1 square kilometer of sea for 20 years.
So it's like you're adopting a section of sea and you pay this money and then they are able to get people to take good care of it.
You know who's going to be the biggest sponsor?
No?
Mobil, Exxon, BP, all the oil companies.
Let's not talk about it.
So a sponsor is someone who helps pay for something, especially sporting events. And I have an alternative idea here. Instead of a sponsor, how about you pay $148 as a birthday gift or a Christmas gift for someone? Wouldn't your green friend really love this? That's what I think. Let's go to our next sentence. The Niue government hopes to raise more than $18 million by selling 127,000 units, or about 40% of its territorial waters.
Okay, note they use the word units. That just means pieces that they can sell piece by piece.
This region would become a no-take protected area where the country will crack down on illegal fishing and serious threats would be reduced.
Which tells us there is probably a lot of illegal fishing going on now.
Yeah, especially in the coral reefs. No-take areas means no fishing, no mining, and no drilling. Let's continue. The Prime Minister stated that the funds raised would be used for monitoring and evaluation activities to assess reef health and fish stocks.
Reef health is a really, really important thing because coral is dying in many places, usually due to pollution.
When we talk about funds, this is money made available to do something very specific. It's not general money. Okay, let's continue to our next sentence here. Funds will also be used to strengthen coastal management plans.
Which means there's a lot of things they could have been doing, but they haven't been doing because they haven't had the money or maybe they haven't had the political will.
All these measures will be taken in hopes of passing down an ocean with a sustainable ecosystem to the next generation. Because let's face it, if they don't manage this correctly, the people of Niue will need to abandon the island.
That's right. It's already an issue because of the rising waters. All right, the last paragraph. Niue's novel idea to preserve its ocean territory has earned sponsorships from around the world. That's pretty straightforward. So they have gotten the news out, I guess, to lots of places. So money is coming in from many, many parts of the globe. This approach highlights the urgent need to address the critical environmental challenges the world's oceans are facing, such as plastic pollution, overfishing, and seawater acidification. So we often don't seem to care that much about the ocean. A lot of our waste is going in there. The water is becoming more acidic, and so a lot of sea life cannot survive.
And I think that you added in probably one of the most critical problems, that rising sea levels are drowning out island nations. A lot of people in the United States still debate whether climate change is happening, if you can believe that. The people that live in tiny island nations are seeing their land disappear.
In front of their very eyes. Our last sentence, governments and individuals alike need to take immediate action to protect our planet. We hear that all the time, but what are we doing? Okay, that's another issue. Let's go to our questions. Number 1, what problem is Niue dealing with?
A, its population has been decreasing.
No, that's not the issue. B, fewer tourists have been visiting the island.
We didn't talk about that.
That's right, and that surprised me because many, many island nations rely heavily on tourism.
Let's look at letter C. Severe plastic pollution is destroying its waters.
It's probably also true, but that is not the correct answer. The correct answer is D. It has difficulty protecting its ocean territory alone.
Let's look at number 2. How can people around the world help protect Niue's ocean territory?
A. By going to Niue in person. What good is that going to do?
B. By donating at least $148.
And that is the correct answer. So let's move on to number 3 now. What will likely occur in Niue's no-take protected area in the future?
A decrease in fish species.
Nope. B, an increase in foreign fishing boats.
That's the opposite. Letter C, more sea creatures swimming in a clean ocean.
That is what we are aiming for. It's what we hope for. That is it for today. Tune in next time. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.